quickly locked myself in my room to send a text message to my beloved Carlos. In an hour, I would run to him from this orphanage. Carlos wrote that he would meet me at the border with Mexico, but he would have to take a lot of risks and the cops could catch him at any moment. I was hastily packing my suitcase when the nanny came into the room. "You were adopted," she said solemnly. "Get ready. We're going to visit your new family right now." 5 minutes later, we went out into the orphanage's yard, and I deliberately hesitated at the car, and when the nanny got behind the wheel, I ran as fast as I could from the territory. "Carlos, my love, wait for me." Oops, there were angry guards around the corner. They instantly pinned me down and dragged me back to the car. Once I was inside, the nanny locked the doors and grinned slyly. "Do what you want. I'll run away anyway," I thought. All the way, the nanny didn't stop talking. She kept saying how lucky I was because such nasty girls rarely found a home. And that my new parents were good people, albeit with their own characteristics. What does that mean? The nanny didn't have time to answer me. We arrived on the threshold of a huge house stood 5 guys. Was I adopted into the army? The tallest of them opened the car door for me, and the other, a fit jock, took things out of the trunk. The others just stood there and stared at me. The nanny immediately left and I was left alone among this bunch of guys. We met. Tall Phil and Jock Pete turned out to be a sweet couple, and at the same time, my new parents. And the other 3 guys were their adopted children. Wow. I needed to get out of this madhouse. I casually tried to take my bag from Dad Pete, but he said he would take my things to my room. Phil asked for my passport and added that they kept all the family's documents in a safe. I didn't want to give my passport. How could I cross the border without it? But Dad Phil looked very stern, and I didn't want to argue. "I'm sorry, Carlos. I didn't think I could escape today." Then lunch was waiting for me. The kitchen table was already set. As soon as I sat down, Mikey, the smallest of the brothers, immediately began to bombard me with questions. Leave me alone. If my passport hadn't been taken away, I'd be in Carlos' arms by now, not listening to this bullshit. The bespectacled nerd Richie was stupidly ignoring me and looking at his phone. The older among the boys, Bully Stan, looked at me for a long time, and then said mockingly that I was the only one here who looked like a Rain Man. What? I gave him the finger, but accidentally brushed my plate and turned it over. I abruptly jumped out of my seat and pretended that Stan had offended me very much, then quickly went to my room. After closing the door, I immediately called my beloved Carlos. He was just furious and shouted that because of me, he almost got caught by the cops at the border. I begged his forgiveness for 10 minutes. In the end, Carlos relented and gave me one last chance, 2 days later. But he also added that if I didn't come there, it was all over between us. My parents came in without knocking, and I barely managed to hide my phone. After them came Bully Stan and Richie the Geek. The brothers immediately began to apologize for their behavior during dinner. I pathetically said that I forgave them, and then I gave them the finger again. Stan grinned approvingly, and then everyone left. But a couple of minutes later, Richie the nerd returned. He was alone. He blurted out that he wasn't really ashamed, and that I wasn't welcome here. I want to run away from here myself to Mexico. Richie thought for a moment and said he was actually willing to help, so he wanted to get rid of me. Seriously? Richie said it was simple. We just needed to think of a way to get his parents out. But this was for little Mikey. He was folks' favorite and knew everything about them. The next morning, I found Mikey in the backyard. He was very happy to see me, but as soon as I told him about my plan with Richie, Mikey burst into tears and said he wouldn't let me go anywhere. Little Mikey, are you in love? I tried to hug him, but he turned away. Mikey, my friend, if you help me, I'll give you a peck on the cheek. He blushed and asked in embarrassment if I was lying. Then I kissed him on the forehead, considerate in advance. Sighing, Mikey said that his parents wanted to go to one concert this weekend, but all the tickets were sold out. He could Photoshop copies of these tickets. Wow, I handed over the fake tickets during lunch. Parents were just in an orgy of enjoyment. Everything seemed to be going well. Only the older bully Stan was silent. He watched me suspiciously from the other end of the table. After lunch, Stan grabbed my arm near the stairs, pulled me close and demanded sternly that I explain what was going on. He was suddenly so close, his thick hair, the smell of men's perfume, his green eyes. My heart began to beat treacherously and I couldn't even say anything. But Stan insisted on an answer. He knew I was up to something. For some reason, I could not confess to him that I had a boyfriend. Instead, I quickly lied that I allegedly had a seriously ill friend in Mexico. Suddenly, Stan felt a surge of emotion. He said that a good friend of his had just died, and that Stan had never had time to visit him before he died. "I'll help you," Stan promised. Before his parents left, I had to steal my passport. Richie the nerd told us that the safe was in their parents' office, but he didn't know the code. Then Stan's help came in handy. It turned out that the parents trusted him as the eldest with the code to the safe. In the evening, when everyone was getting ready for bed, I snuck into my parents' office. Just as I hit the first digit of the code, I heard footsteps approaching. One of the fathers was coming here. I started looking for a place to hide when I heard Stan's voice. He deliberately distracted his father. I hurried to the safe and quickly entered the code. The safe opened. Grabbing my passport, I slipped out of the room, right behind my father and Stan. I didn't believe it, but I did it. Carlos, we'll be together soon. In the evening, I gathered all the guys in my room. I had to decide how to get to the border tomorrow. Stan again volunteered to help and said that he would take me without any problems and he would borrow the car from his friend. I smiled and little Mikey mimicked Stan. Was Mikey jealous of me? What nonsense. Yes. Stan, of course, was smart, honest, caring, and handsome. Trying to push these thoughts away, I abruptly told the guys that I wanted to sleep. The escape would be tomorrow. We needed to gain strength. Early in the morning, my parents left for a concert. The bus was only an hour away from leaving for Mexico. I was wildly worried, constantly looking at the clock. Stan was still missing. Finally, we heard a car horn. Stan! We ran to the car. Stan, in his defense, said that his friends changed his mind about giving the car and he had to steal it. Wow. Stan, it's time. If we don't leave in 5 minutes, we'll be late. Richie the nerd said that I was a great girl. Little Mikey put his arm around my neck and whispered that I wasn't going anywhere without my passport. What did he mean? Then Mikey pointed to the trash can. My passport lay in it, torn into small pieces. Mikey, what have you done? They won't let me cross the border now. That's all. Tears welled up in my eyes. Richie the nerd immediately took his phone and said that he found one point where documents were rarely checked. The bus left there in 10 minutes. I immediately jumped into Stan's car and we drove to the bus. I had never driven so fast, but we made it. At the bus stop, Stan hugged me so tightly that I stopped breathing for a second. That's when Carlos called me. Damn it. I turned away and held the phone to my ear. My love, I'm waiting for you. Where are you? Came from the phone. Stan seemed to hear everything. Without answering Carlos, I dropped the call. Stan, see you. But it was clear from his face that he understood. I started to explain, but he interrupted me and told me to go to the bus. Immediately. With mixed feelings, I boarded the bus full of Mexicans. I suddenly realized that very soon I would be in a foreign country with a man I barely knew. What was I doing? The bus moved slowly. I watched through the window as Stan stole a sad look at me, then got into the car and started the engine. Wait! Stop! The driver braked sharply. I ran out the doors. Tears rolled down my face as I ran as fast as I could to Stan's car. He didn't know what was going on, so he stepped out onto the road and I gave him a big hug. Stan, I don't need to go to Mexico. I wanted to stay here with you. Half an hour later, Stan and I returned home, and Richie and Mikey met us at the door. I hugged Richie. Mikey stood off to the side, embarrassed. He was still ashamed because of my passport. I went over to him and patted his head. You know, Mikey, when you grow up, you're going to find love. In the meantime, you're the best little brother in the world to me. We all hugged together. At this moment, the parents came into the house. It turned out that Phil had a stomach ache on the way and they decided to go back. When Phil and Pete saw us hugging, they said it was great that I finally started loving my brothers. That evening after dinner, Richie took me aside and told me that in the internet, from Carlos's phone number, somebody was looking for girls to work as dancers abroad. This Carlos was a real bandit. And I could have been completely screwed. The nanny called me in the morning. She wanted to know how I was doing. Barely restraining my emotions, I replied in a serious tone that everything was fine. But then I could not stand it. Almost squealing with joy, I thanked her. Thank you, nanny, for changing my life so dramatically. After all, this time, I found not only a home and a family, but also, it seems, true love.